all this time, what we've been doing is we have been, trying to see the environment out there for you and whatever the challenges you're facing and how we can support you, and trying to bring in those needs assessments forward. And also, if there are any ideas that you have already been, change the ways in how you work on a normal day of your organization, we wanted to be that conduit to share the information. Today, we thought of taking a bit of a different approach, where we wanted to go back to the past sessions, look at your chat sessions, look at the survey responses that you have given, and see the recurring themes of our ongoing conversations. And we identified three. So those three we have brought back to our agenda today. And today is a day for you to really share with us as to what you have been doing, how you've reset the organization, so that in case a peer from our forum today is able to pick an idea from that and to reappropriate it to their organization. And while you have that conversation, we will also have the opportunity to see on what additional support, what else that we as Volunteer MBC, your local volunteer center, can do for you. So our agenda today is to do a little bit of a check-in, and also to go back to the three recurring themes that we thought that we wanted to have a discussion on today. One is about the communications, your inter-team communications, as well as the general public communications and your communications with the volunteers. What have you done so far? How have you changed the way you work? And is there anything else that we can do to support? And during all our calls with this forum, as well as the external forums that we have been engaged in, the risk assessment and screening has been a recurring topic that's been coming over and over again. So we thought of sharing a few insights and to see what you have done on that front as well. And then again, to being true to our organization and the support that we provide, the mobilization of volunteers, what else can we do? What have you done? So we would like to engage in that conversation today. And also my colleagues will share how to move forward from here, because right now we are almost a little over 4 weeks into working remotely and with the physical distancing environment. So from here, how do we proceed? What do we need to do? What do we as Volunteer NBC can do to support you? So with that, can we move on to the next slide, Sean? Okay, so I hand over to my colleagues to talk about going back as to what we've done.
Hi, everybody. This is Sean. Slides are moving a little slow, but I'm eager to talk to you about how we're communicating and how we're communicating now, and what we were discussing 7 weeks ago when we got into this emergency and things started to unfold. We were at a stage where there was a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty, and there still is uncertainty, but at the same time, I think our community has really rallied in that 7 weeks. So when we looked at all the different topics that we could cover since we started engaging with you in this format on March 20th, we discovered that their communication was a major area in which different ideas were discussed. So a few of those I'd like to start with is, one is establishing the key messages. So we had to discuss where exactly our volunteers were. Are they if we're not able to see them, how are we able to get out our messages to them, and what are those messages that we wanted to share with them? So definitely we were discussing the importance of reinforcing public health related messaging from reliable sources, and providing resources to volunteers, especially in frontline roles. Those were a couple of the main areas where we were kind of focused on creating some key messaging out of it, and encouraging all of our member organizations to create key messaging to that effect. Similarly, one of the key things of COVID-19 that we had been facing over the past several weeks is the increased effect of social isolation on people. We spoke to the need to address social isolation, and what we could do for it. But over the course of all of our conversations, one of the things that kept recurring was how do we engage those inactive volunteers? For many organizations, if you had scaled back your program, some organizations had completely stopped engaging their volunteers in their volunteer roles. So how do you keep those inactive volunteers engaged and happy? How do you direct inactive volunteers to be redeployed into roles where they could engage? And also, how could we check in on our volunteers and put people in our community? So we had a really healthy conversation about telephone check-in programs and some of the programs that exist and how some organizations are shifting to adapt or introduce those type of programs. And I think it's really something that we're going to see more of, and we definitely would like to continue to build on that, so that organizations that are doing that, or organizations that can support other organizations that are doing that, would be able to do it. Because we are told that even after the emergency period ends and the community opens up a little bit more, that it's not going to be the case that social isolation will go away. And we pointed to the stat that 1 in 5 Canadians were facing social isolation, and that was before COVID-19. And the increase of how many people are facing, COVID-19 related feelings of isolation is major. So that's something that we definitely have touched on in the past. And then updating and restructuring available volunteer opportunities, the importance of being able to provide a way for people to engage, so that and how we could communicate that. And so we'll be discussing that in a bit further. And certainly how volunteer recognition changes. We went through National Volunteer Week in a very different way, and we had some campaigns going on, as well as if you could just mute your mics when you're not speaking. Now, one of the things about recognizing volunteers is that there's many ways in which volunteers can be recognized virtually. We're actually at a time when it can be better in some ways to leverage our social media to do virtual volunteer recognition, because that's where people are communicating. We don't have to be dependent on having in-person events to recognize volunteers. So that's definitely something that is definitely something we have to work on, and also we have to think about how we can enhance that now and use that as an opportunity to enhance it. So these are some of the things that were discussed in our conversations over the last 2 months. And I think one of the things that we'd like to be able to know now is how much of this have you been able to do? What challenges do you face now as far as doing that? Has your organization been able to shift? And so the key question, that sort of overarching question is, for us here is, let me just try to advance this slide here. What communications have you had with volunteers since the start of the emergency? So we'd like to find out on this topic. Have you introduced a check-in program? Have you been having many touch points with your volunteers? Have you been issuing emails with them? Have volunteers reached out to you? Let us know. The floor is open. Just unmute your mic when you are ready to speak. And we'd absolutely love to hear from you.
Hi.
Hi there.
I'm Kathy. I'm from Eden Food for Change. I've had a lot of communication with our volunteers just through emails. So I started by keeping them engaged with the question on how they're dealing with COVID-19, and we got a lot of really good ideas to share. So all of those ideas got shared with everybody. And then every week I send out a different sharing project, I call them. So the next one was a recipe share. And then this week was your favorite sort of binge-worthy TV. And that one has been a huge hit. So was the recipes. And then I sent out one on your favorite takeout restaurants, because a lot of us are doing a lot of that too. So just keeping them engaged that way. As far as when they want to start coming back, because we still have to social distance, we're just going to have to see how that's going to work. Other than that, that's the communications we've been having, and it's been going well. People are still like, they'll send me pictures of their, new grandchildren or whatever, and we just keep the pictures going and keeping everybody happy.
Thanks, Kathy. That's very, very robust level of communication you've had with volunteers. And certainly, have you been seeing at your organization when people have responded, have they indicated that, they were feeling lonely, or what the impact of your communication had on them, that they appreciated you reaching out and so forth?
They definitely appreciate me reaching out. I get a lot of thank yous for it. They enjoy the topics, which is good, because that tells me, they're still having fun. I've also, when I sent out the one for how you're dealing with COVID-19, I did put a little thing on the bottom, and I said, if anybody needs to talk, I'm here. So, if you need to phone me, if you want to do it, whatever, on email, you can do it. Just give me a shout if there's anything, you want to do. And then I want to try to do something like this, a team meeting, and get everybody together for like a coffee time.
Right. Yeah. So the availability of, the different tools out there to do a big, hey, everybody jump onto a live chat, engage your volunteers that way, giving them opportunity to kind of see each other. I think that's really great, and I think that's great, Kathy. Anyone else want to share about how they've been communicating with their volunteers since the start of the emergency?
This is Gaia from Rotary Club Mississauga-Malton and Kingfish Matters.
Hi, Gaia.
Hi. So what I've been doing is doing weekly phone calls with my volunteers and trying to set up online format programming for our coding program, and doing that, and just engaging with the instructors and just checking in with them every week and just talking. And we're trying to launch the online programming probably by the end of like in a couple of weeks in May or early June, if Microsoft doesn't open in Square One, because that's where we originally had the coding program run. And as for my other volunteers, just checking in with them daily, just to ask them how they're doing, and they're asking me how they can help in the community and stuff like that. So I'm just dispersing them out with social distancing if they need help to go drive for the food bank and everything else like that.
Okay, great. So I want to ask about how you mentioned that you've been engaging them and sort of reorienting programming to be more, virtual. So did the volunteers sort of just jump on that? Were they really eager to participate in that, or was there reluctance with the changeover?
No, I just told them to do it for the time being till Microsoft opens again in Square One. So they're very eager to do that, because both of them, one instructor, she is a teacher at a college, and the other one, he's an engineering by profession. So they're very familiar with the online format. So they took it at ease and they jumped on it right away. But we're just having a little bit of trouble with the software right now. But as soon as it gets done, we'll hope to launch it in a couple more weeks and start the programming soon.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Gaia.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to share on this before we move on? All right. Well, if something else comes up, or if you want to unmute yourself or leave a comment in the chat, we'll love to hear more. Absolutely. These are the things that certainly really matter at this time. For us as a volunteer center, when the crisis struck, our first thought was, we must communicate with our member organizations and all the other organizations and stakeholders in the community about what's taking place, and reaching out to our volunteers. We had a virtual National Volunteer Week, and that was different. But I think going into this next few weeks and until things return not to normal, but to having at least a little bit more personal FaceTime physically, we're going to have to continue to not get sort of complacent on the communications, and as much as possible, we have to develop some new programs and opportunities for people to volunteer and for people to participate in recreation and other types of things. And that is starting to happen, and more things are emerging, and people are discovering new things, and the level of competency and comfort with doing things online is also coming up. So I think this is a great opportunity for a lot of analysis and thought on that. So I'm going to hand it back to Shaminda to talk a little bit about the risk and screening insights we had.
Thanks, Sean. So folks, over the surveys and the needs assessments that we've done, there are a few questions that kept coming up. That's what you see on the screen over here. How do we handle onboarding of volunteers with it being difficult to obtain police records checks? And what can we do to remove screening barriers, and how to respond to the many emerging grassroots caring groups? And also we've noticed how do we ensure volunteers and clients are safe, and what is then we started to reflect as to what is our role in that. And so today I'm going to share 6 questions that you might want to ask when you're thinking about your risk assessments and screening. This is by all means not a training session, and we've had a session before. I just want to share with you some tips because I think that as the conditions and even the regulations being applied during these few periods are changing, so will the need to sort of reset on how we've been carrying out our risk assessments and our screening practices will change. But there are 6 questions that I would like to sort of leave with you, so that you can do a quick assessment of your risks and then see what else that you can do to either add safeguards to change how the risks are being mitigated. So the first question that I would like to leave with you is to think of when you are engaging a volunteer with your clientele or with their role, what is the position of power and authority that the volunteer has over the clients? And if there is, then how do you sort of mitigate the risk that's taking place because of that particular situation? Sean, next one. And then what are the tasks and direct relationship with the client? For example, is the client all by themselves, is the volunteer all by themselves with the client? And should you be thinking of is it a risk, and what can you do to mitigate? And also to think of the level of access to personal and private information about the client, because so many volunteering roles during this particular period is done virtually. Sometimes you may have to give access to a client's personal information, and if you have to, how do you mitigate the risks that comes along with it? Do you require a police reference check because of that, or do you require a police reference check? Is there anything else that you can do? For example, if there is a chat-based, if you're a counseling service, or if you are providing virtual consultations, is the chat being monitored by someone from your staff team? Sean, the next one. And is the setting isolated, and could there be any inherent danger for the volunteer, for the client as well as the volunteer? If the setting is isolated and it's only the 2 of them or the 2 parties involved, then are there any inherent danger that you could foresee? And the level of supervision that can be afforded, and I use the term afforded as on purpose, because sometimes the position may require a higher level of supervision, but with the current setting and the way that you have sort of readjusted your operations, can you afford that high level of supervision? If you can, then it's good. And how do you apply that into your screening processes? And if you cannot, then what do you do? So think about those things. And the question is, what does our insurance policy say? Like, I remember Robert bringing this up in a previous session as well, because sometimes the insurance policy itself may dictate that you require a certain screening practices that needs to be applied to you when you're designing the role, because your first five will say that there is no requirement of a police reference check, but does your insurance policy say that you really need to get one? So these 6 questions will help you to do a quick assessment when you have to make a sudden pivot in the way that you've been applying screening. And from there onwards, then you the next step is for you to think of, are there ways and methods that we can reduce? And when we open the forum for you, we will inquire as to what you've been done. So please do take pointers from your peers and even ask a question so that all of us can help you with finding an answer, if it's possible to find that answer today. If not, we will provide to you either via email or over a phone call. And I use this acronym to help us remember on how to mitigate risk. Can you reduce the risk? Can you completely eliminate the risk? Or are there any safeguards that you can put to make sure that the risk is taken care of? And can you transfer the risk to maybe another organization who's an expert in providing the particular services that has taken the risk into consideration? And an example that I can give you as to sudden pivots that you may need to make is with the new regulations and the new standards and suggestions that the province is coming out with when it comes to gradually phasing out the coming out to our social environment. Are there any changes taking place? If you have individuals who, if you had a program that's been making face masks to help various other organizations, and now is there a change in how you engage these volunteers? Would you have to think of instead of the cloth face mask, would you have to think of any other alternative methods like the plexiglass shield that we see that few individuals have sort of introduced? And how are these things done? And when those programs are being run, how do you sort of handle that risk of having individuals in one place or having these items being transported from one place to the other? Because one thing that we know about COVID is that it's actively transferable through whatever the item or material that you are touching. So how do you manage that? Think of these these 6 questions and see whether there's anything that tells you that you need to change the way that you are screening based on the current context with all in how the COVID-19 risk mitigation is progressing provincially and locally. Sean, over to you. Okay, so a question that we can ask is, or we would like us to sort of have a discussion, what screening protocols have you maintained, changed, or added? Like, have you done a reset in how the screening and the risk assessments are being done? Like, is there something that you did which is new, like an innovative, sort of a program, or is there anything else that you would like to know to address a challenge that you have so far when it comes to screening? We open the forum for your questions, and let's see whether we can find answers.
While people are thinking about this question, Shimon, I think one of the things that was relevant in our past discussions that I think was definitely something that we were seeing little messages from organizations on was about with the absence or a different level of difficulty in obtaining the police record checks. What did that mean for their organizations? And I think some organizations were asking about getting affidavits from volunteers, like a sworn affidavit or a declaration to state that they don't have a criminal record, or things like that. So I wonder also if any of the other organizations here have been implementing such protocols as well, or even the organizations, if some of them have simply stopped intake of new volunteers. That might be the case as well.
Sean, while the discussion is going on, I'd be able to switch back to the previous slide so that it might trigger.
This one or?
Yeah, this one.
Previous. Okay.
Hi, Kathy again from Eden. We're not really bringing in any new volunteers at this point. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
We're not bringing in any new. A few new people came in, but they were family or friends of other volunteers that were there. But our volunteering has scaled back substantially. We just can't fit that number of people into the food bank addresses. So we've scaled those back, which is fine because we've switched to a hamper program. But so bringing on anybody new at this point, they're not necessarily, they're just carrying out boxes. So if I do bring anybody new, mostly it's just, can you carry a 20-pound box? We're not really getting into bringing it. And I don't know when we'll get back to that. We were talking about it last night. I'm not sure when we'll get back to it because we're lucky we have a long wait list for volunteers, but and mostly they're not isolated with a client except if they're an advocate, and they don't, advocates really aren't like, we don't bring them in right away as an advocate. They have to go through other steps first, if you know what I mean. Other than that, yeah, I mean, we've never really had a problem, and I don't think we will. And I think most of our other ones will come back. So we should be good on that front, but I don't know about changing anything at this point. As far as what we've done as an organization to safeguard the volunteers is we've switched to hampers. Only one member client is allowed in at a time. And basically they come in, they sign in, they get we put their boxes in a cart and out it goes, and then that's it. There's not really a lot, but they're all wearing gloves. Some might be wearing masks. I'm not quite sure, but it's up to them if they want to do that. And ongoing, you're right. I don't know what we're going to do with the masks that we're putting up a plexiglass, because that's definitely something to think about. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there any organization in the forum today who may have a challenge regarding, the risk management and screening for a program that really requires a new intake of volunteers, but there is one sort of a challenge that is keeping you at bay? So while we think that, Sean, going back to what you just shared with regards to the police reference checks, the best suggestion that we can give is to just go back to the principle of due diligence. If you have a service or a program that needs to run without disruption, and it's an essential service that must be carried out, and at the same time, if you require volunteers and you need to recruit more volunteers to provide that service, just make sure that you sort of try to address these 6 questions, and at the same time you've done your due diligence in making sure that the REST acronym over here is maintained in some way or the other. Because always remember that the police reference check is one defense line, but not the only defense line, and the police reference check is good as at the date that it was obtained. And on that note, you might have to make a decision as to if an individual does have a police reference check done prior to applying to your organization, how far are you going to go with its validity period? Is it within the last 6 months or within the last 12 months? Or so make those decisions. Make sure that you put your logical thinking on the line and see what can we do to maintain due diligence in terms of designing that role and the screening processes.
Thanks, Shaminda. Before we get into the next section, and I hand it over to Madhuri for that, Madhuri, are there any comments that we can read out? I'm not able to see them on my screen.
Yes, Shan. So Andrea suggested that they're just preparing all the paperwork and keeping everything ready. And once the OPP is back and running in Caledon, they will be taking them again for the process. So they're kind of preparing everything up front and keeping the documents ready. So once the OPPS has opened the services again, they can just bring them, completing that documentation as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it also sort of ties in to our next section, which is about our emergency response and how we've sort of talked about over the last few weeks how we can ensure that volunteers are getting to the right places. But of course, you need to have the recruitment part sort of sorted out. So if you want to, Madhuri, go ahead and speak to how we're mobilizing volunteers in the emergency, and as well as even how we're thinking about centralizing screening and so forth. I think it would be very beneficial for people.
Okay, thanks, Sean. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Madhuri from Volunteer MBC. At Volunteer MBC, we are working and helping organizations to connect with the skilled volunteers at this time, which is the most important aspect to having how to engage them at this current time and situation with the organization who needs of these skills and talents. So becoming like a one platform for connecting them and providing a win-win situation for the organization, helping them to connect these skills volunteers and the organization to have that. So one of the example I would say as a simple example, if somebody who has facilitating skills, we be able to connect those skills with the organization who need at this moment to facilitate a webinar or working something, a virtual role. So how we can connect them and make that happening and making a successful recruitment following the 10 steps of screening, because at this given time we are struggling with to find that completing all the aspects of screening, but making sure what is the level of the risk involved in that particular role, completing all the paperwork and documentation required while doing that, and making that not just a check mark over, but literally trying to see what is the ideal situation for us following the 10 steps of screening. As Shaminda mentioned, that's police record checks is not only the one aspect, but definitely it involves like what level of risk and whether it's high risk or low level of risk. We have to make sure that we do our 10 steps of screening.
Okay, thanks, Madhuri. So would you like to speak a little bit onto the sort of the emergency plan elements of this plan?
Yes, so currently we are looking for recruit more volunteer drivers and helping other of our member organizations to, because that's one of the most important and most upcoming and needed services that community organizations are struggling to how to recruit volunteers for that specific role. Trying to engage them, how to connect them with our organizations. So that's one, and working on different projects with mobilizing them as one of the important tasks that we are working around.
Great, thanks. I think one of the things also is that there are lots of people in the community and these community groups where people are driving to help each other out, and that's very good. At the same time, the risks, to like if something happens, and driving unfortunately is a risky endeavor, even in the best of circumstances. So that means also that an organization that's engaging volunteer drivers should be doing certain things, viewing their driver's license, viewing their auto insurance prior to asking them certain questions to ensure that they are comfortable and feeling safe, and that they can operate the vehicles, and that I think is is part of the screening process, but it's also we're going to need to really consider how the increased demand on being able to deliver things to people when they can't necessarily go everywhere, especially for vulnerable populations like seniors who may not be able to leave home anyway. So that's something we're going to definitely need to do some work on. So the idea around the Peel mobilization of volunteers emergency system that we're interested in developing in collaboration with all of you is to establish what are organizations thinking about doing, what would they complete in the time that they're engaging volunteers, what might they actually be able to leverage in terms of supports and in terms of being able to provide additional resources to the table. An organization that engages a lot of teachers might, as volunteers, may be required for certain types of emergency needs, whereas another organization might have a lot of volunteers who have a healthcare background. So there could be a skill-based look at reallocating volunteers, or it could be something else. It could be that an organization will need substantially more volunteers or less. These are things that are part of it. And then there's also the communication piece. So how organizations can help strengthen key communications. So if your organization reaches several hundred or thousand clients in a given period of time, what messaging would need to go out in the case of an emergency to make sure that they hear the important things, and we would need to know, did those people get the message? And that goes for your volunteers and your clients. So the emergency system is something.
Sorry, Shan, before we go, it's one of the things that we were finding an issue was a lot of people were submitting their documents, and many did have an expired license. So I would definitely like to add that yes, they can get a temporary license to renew, and they can get in within maximum 2 business days. They'll be having a temporary license, and the original will mail to be within 4 to 6 weeks. So I would like to share.
Via Service Ontario.
Yes.
Right. Very
Thank
good.
Sean, can I just quickly interrupt? I also wanted to raise an issue that we're hearing about, and I'm not sure if there's any settlement organizations on the line. I think Indus is on the line, but that vulnerable clients, especially with low income, are having great difficulties in completing their tax returns. And it's a service that normally a lot of the organizations are helping them with, and they have volunteers that are willing to help clients to complete those tax returns. So, if that's it's just looking at potential needs, because there's definitely volunteers that have a finance background that would be willing to perform that kind of a volunteer role. So I think, we really need to look at, it can happen in a virtual capacity for the most part as well. So what skills can we utilize that the volunteers bring to really help your clients, but also to help your operations at the same time, to help you reset and figure out an emergency plan or coming out of the emergency going forward and things like that. So just wanted to plant that seed, and definitely something that Robert can craft a role for if that's a need, help you craft the positions, and you just, we're ultimately, we're trying to play that connector role and help as many organizations as possible. Thanks.
Thanks, Karina. And I think on the point of even supporting the organization's operations, I think it was Katie from the town who shared with us that stat about how 18% of the organizations in Caledon, about 1 in 5, have seen substantial impact in terms of their staffing. It could be higher than that, actually, as we kind of keep continuing into this emergency period. There are different supports from the government coming, but I think it's something that we have to anticipate as a trend that organizations that were there will be in a more difficult position in terms of resources, and even to support the individual staff members. It can sometimes be for in the precarious work situation that is so prevalent in our community and in our sector, that we're going to see that some people might not feel they benefit from staying on as a staff member, whereas if they can access some of the employment benefits, that might be an impact, and it's going to result in organizations really needing the additional resource capacity that skilled volunteers bring. So I think that's really important. So the overarching question that we wanted to kind of ask about, and is how are organizations adapting and mobilizing volunteers. So Robert, we've been mentioning Robert's name quite a bit in terms of talking about how we can help you with your positions. I'd like to invite him to talk a little bit about what he's seeing on the ground, and also what might be done. So Robert.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, this is really interesting because, again, we've had basically a month of lockdown. Some people are totally locked down. Others are not so. But what I've done here, and I think I've categorized this before, but it's worth repeating. There are three basic streams that I've seen develop in the context of the emergency. The one that perhaps right now has the most visibility, and also, I guess you could say, at least theoretically, the most demand, is what I call the direct response to the emergency. And we've already mentioned several roles, particularly for example, the delivery driver role, which I characterized as a distance physical intervention, because if you're delivering groceries, medications to people who are, for whatever reason, totally isolated, you're not going to actually be in touch with them, but you still have to follow certain protocols. And it's not a virtual role. It's getting out there, getting in your car, going to the home of the individual that you're helping, and leaving whatever packages have been requested and you need to leave. And then sort of stepping back from that into the virtual world, we have what I have characterized the virtual involvement designed to assist those affected. The classic telephone check-in, which has predated the emergency, but what the emergency has done is basically forced, or at least, shall we say, strongly invited the public to get engaged with things like Skype, Zoom, Microsoft Teams that we're doing right now, in order to enhance, not enhance the communication, but in some ways offset the physical deprivation, as I call it. So those volunteers are wrapped up in in direct response. And then secondarily, I've categorized what I call virtual roles that enable organizations to carry out its engagement during the emergency. This is what I think Sean has been just referred to, and Maduri also referred to it. Community service organizations, and it's no secret, some of them are having real difficulty making the transition, adapting. On the other hand, Volunteer NBC has seen that if we can characterize, or at least classify, certain volunteers in terms of their skills, and some of them have extremely sophisticated skills, and perhaps more importantly, experience, then we can assemble, and indeed have assembled, ready pools of volunteers who in a focused way can be directed to your community organization in order to help you. It's a natural, really, that this would happen. The only thing is, it's much more transitional than the direct response. The direct response is like, the need's right there, we got to do something. The third category is what I call positions where volunteers are screened and recruited virtually so that they're ready after the emergency when programs resume. I've said this before, I'll say it again. While I realize that many organizations have laid off staff, unfortunately, or basically told volunteers because the actual programs are in suspension, stay home, so to speak. But on the other hand, if you have time and you know what's coming up, then you know what you need, then why not put a position together, put a role together, and screen for it virtually. I have one example of an organization where they were looking for social media, and it was not just because of COVID-19. They were looking to enhance their brand in the community, get the message out, establish their presence in a much stronger fashion. Well, lo and behold, during COVID-19, the position was not only reactivated by Volunteer NBC, but it was promoted through our Facebook page. And that position hadn't been performing, shall we say, very energetically. But during COVID-19, instead of maybe having 6 applicants through Volunteer NBC system, we had 12, even more. I think it topped up around 16. So people are paying attention, and they're saying, well, we're going to get out of this, and we are. So why not get myself in position as a volunteer for when the emergency ends? So those in a nutshell are the types of volunteer positions that we're looking at.
Thanks, Robert. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot about over this period of time is the virtual volunteers, the skilled volunteers, but especially in terms of the emergency, we have to not just think about it within our organization, but also in terms of how we can support organizations that are engaging those volunteers in different ways. So, the easiest thing on you perhaps would be redirect them back to Volunteer NBC and, let us, engage with them directly. If that's, feasible, then that's great. But it's definitely something we want to know from you is, at this point, how are you engaging your volunteers? We've heard from a few people, bringing up new programming. Are there others who are currently engaging their volunteers in skilled or virtual roles that are either continuing or new? If you're recruiting, or is there an opportunity that you could recruit? You could scale up one of those number of volunteer roles potentially if you had the additional support. So, for example, if you have a telephone check-in program, but you're just like, well, we already have 50 volunteers on the telephone check-in program, I don't think we could take on more. But if we were organizations were collaborating, working together, and kind of investing more resources into the management of those volunteers, then perhaps that program could be scaled so that we could engage more volunteers and accomplish more check-ins in our community. So these are things that we're interested to know from you. How are you engaging your volunteers at this time?
Hi, Sean, it's Derek from City. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Derek.
Hi, everyone. I wanted to talk in this point more about redirecting the positions because our position, we're not recruiting volunteers and we don't need any right now. And I want to address some of the points a lot of you have discussed, which I think are really good. I really like the way we're mobilizing the volunteers through Volunteer NBC. And to some of the points about the virtual volunteering that Rob and Corrine had mentioned, I know I was attending a virtual meeting that Corrine was at about Spark Ontario. And for some of the volunteer positions, the virtual positions don't even have to be done in the community. They can be done from people, in different parts of the country. And Corrine spoke or put comments about this, that all of those positions through Spark Ontario would be best mobilized through the local volunteer centers, and I agree. So for example, the way I engage the volunteers is any questions we get or I get directly, I recruit them to volunteer NBC, and you've got all these other great organizations where you guys are putting all the positions up. But I just wanted to say the point that I think for some of those virtual positions that and again, I'm not trying to dump everything on Volunteer NBC. You guys are just do a great job with stuff, and you were asking. So, and Corinne had mentioned it before. So I think that those types of things should be just go through one place. And if it's Volunteer NBC, and then, you know, you're able to put those same positions for all these organizations that need virtual people. And if they can do it from a different part of the province or wherever, then that's great. That might help fill the need. And so I just wanted to mention that because that was something new to me that I had never thought of. And of course, Corinne had and figured it out. But so I just wanted to mention that there. And I also think with this group, again, I don't know everybody here and everybody doesn't know me, but if Volunteer NBC reaches out on behalf of other organizations as well, to me, that would be something that might benefit the group because, again, people may not know me or feel comfortable or know how to contact me. And it's also easier, again, for me to deal with people that I know, and you guys are familiar with all the organizations. So you might say, yeah, I'm not going to reach out to Derek for that position, but I'm going to reach out to that organization. So I think if any of us need to reach out to other organizations, it would be helpful to contact you guys first as well, to direct us to which organizations might be able to benefit us or vice versa.
Thanks, Derek. You made a number of good points there. Just touch on two of them quickly. One is about the province-wide or nationwide effort, and Corinne's giving a little time warning, so I'll keep it brief. But basically, Spark Ontario, where when organizations post opportunities with us, we're able to kind of feed those up to a Spark Ontario, which is sort of a province-wide portal. And it picks up many volunteer opportunities from different volunteer centers. So there's definitely people from outside of Peel coming and noticing those virtual volunteer positions. So it potentially increases your pool of skilled volunteers available. That's one thing. And on the point about collaboration, one of the collaborations we're working with a number of organizations that are delivering food to their clients, and in order to do that, the food is being prepared by another organization. In this case, it's the TRCA is preparing quite a number of meals, and so we're playing a role. And sometimes having a third party kind of broker that does discussions and kind of figure out, okay, where is the assets and where who has what. Really helps. So by all means, you can come to Volunteer NBC and try to find out, which organizations are doing that. It can be a time saver for you if you do that. So we're just short on time. We'll just get into quickly what we've been attempting to do. I've been basically looking at a number of different things that we've been doing over the past few weeks in order to do this. We mentioned we're recruiting drivers. We mentioned that we're engaging people and groups that are producing protective masks. One of the key things that came from the last few weeks was how we want to centralize screening. And so, can we help organizations screening? It takes a lot of effort. It takes, even at best, there's always a human element that's involved in screening to discern whether some volunteers are the right volunteers are in the right positions, so that they can be referred or placed into volunteer roles where that they are safe and all of our clients are safe. So that's one of the key things that we're working on, and I'd absolutely love to show some of you what we're working on and get input from different organizations over the next few weeks as we kind of enhance our screening centralization on what are the types of things that they need, or what are the types of checks that they do already, or let us even see the documentation around it, so that you can really be able to participate and if we can help you get your volunteers and do a little bit more of the work for you as it gets much more complicated for organizations to do all that themselves. And then we're definitely growing in terms of what we want to do on social media. So I just wanted to say that for the social media, please, let us know if you have a key volunteer who would love to be involved in a segment or share what they've done, if whether they're frontline or somebody who's not active now but was very active before. We want to be able to share those stories, both for the recognition aspect as well, because people need to hear about good things in their community that are happening. Our AGM will be on June 25th at 12 p.m. We've decided, keep it in this time slot. We want to continue to engage you and hear from you and our member organizations to be able to, understand what we're all about and up to in the next while. And we'll be talking a lot about our strategic plan at that point for the next few years. So we need your participation and support there. For sure. There's a poll in the chat box about topics that we'd love to delve into. We want to hear from you. Some people are saying the poll's not working for them. Okay, that's okay. If you scroll up a little bit, there's a checkbox for you to vote. Pick your top two. Hopefully, it'll work for those of you. If it's not, no problem. But do try to let us know in the chat what topics you want to hear about. The things that I mentioned in the poll around mentorship, the impact of employment on the sector, and how that also impacts volunteers who may also be suffering from reduced employability. Technology and how we can use different tools to engage virtually. Youth volunteering, how we can engage youth volunteers or support youth through our volunteer programs. And then developing volunteer-led or volunteer-heavy programs. That's something that we've talked about a little bit, but maybe there's something we can talk about there and how we can work together to make that happen, or what types of ways we can collaboratively apply for joint programs. And then building a centralized recruitment and screening methodology. That's definitely something that we're already working on, but you want us to get more into that with you. So pick a couple of those items or others and let us know in the chat what you'd like to hear about. And we'd be very excited to engage with you in that. I'm 1 minute over time, and I know that people have a very sort of heavy schedule. So I just want to conclude there and give anybody an opportunity to add any additional comments or ask any additional questions. And we can also take some of those items offline. But it's really going to help us when you tell us what you like to hear and see and do and engage with, because that's how we're going to proceed. And we'd like to be able to continue engaging with you. Certainly, this is a format that seems to be helpful. It's very, it can be, there's a lot to cover. And we try to pack all of this in an hour, and it's not, quite enough time always. But I think if you're interested in what we're doing and interested in collaborating on specific things or looking at a very specific thing, we're very capable of being able to reach out to you and work with you and other organizations that are doing similar things. So we want to initiate those projects, but it usually has to be driven from organizations like yours. That's how it happens. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Any comments?
Sean, there are a few comments that to some of the members of the forum, the poll is not working.
Okay. All right. Well, they don't necessarily have. If you aren't able to vote in the poll, just let us know in the comments which ones are interesting to you. If you're not seeing the options, I'll read them out again. One is engaging volunteer mentors. Another is impact on employment and how volunteerism can help. Technology and virtual tools to enhance organizations. Engaging youth volunteers. Developing volunteer-led or volunteer-heavy programs. And then building a centralized recognition system for Peel, including different badges and certificates. So I'm seeing some good comments from people. If you're not, don't worry if you're not able to vote in the poll. These are emerging technologies. I know a lot of people have been able to vote, but it might not work for everyone depending on what platform you're engaging with us in. But essentially, it's all about for us finding out from you. The poll options are just suggestions. There could be many other things you're interested in talking about. Let us know. We'll conclude there. If you still want to engage in the chat or anybody who has a question or comment, please let me know. Up to count 10. Anyone else want to weigh in from the Volunteer BC staff before we adjourn?
Just wanted to thank everyone for attending today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you everybody so much. And we look forward to seeing you in our next sessions for sure, but mark that calendar. You'll be receiving communication about our AGM, quite soon. Probably next week we'll make that official, spread the word out. You're giving people on the call are getting the kind of heads up, but we definitely need your participation in that. And because it's virtual, we have an opportunity to let even more people know about Volunteer in BC and what we're doing. And I think it's going to be really important that everybody understand that Volunteer in BC is a collective of all of these organizations and people who are very interested in betterment of our community. So it's your AGM, not our AGM. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.